Conchita on one of my Facebook groups. She had walked the entire width of Costa Rica at the age of 70 on the new Costa Rica Camino. I just had to get her on the program to tell us all about it. And I decided during that interview that I was going to hike it myself, and I invited you to come along. 10 of you said yes, and together last April, we walked the 175 miles between the Caribbean to the Pacific. On today's show, you'll hear all about our triumphs as well as the struggles we encountered as we trekked Costa Rica across the entire continent through several ecosystems and through rural villages untouched by tourism. It was an amazing experience, and I can't wait to share it with you. So let's get started. Welcome to the Active Travel Adventures podcast. I'm your host, Kit Parks. As mentioned, it was my chat with the ever lively and inspiring Conchita that inspired this journey. I figured that if Tina Conchita could do this at age 70, surely I, an avid hiker, almost a decade younger, would have no problem, especially if I trained. The trail itself turned out to be much more challenging than I had expected, and I'll speak more about that later. I remember that Conchita mentioned that Juancho was a guide who would take detours off the trail on some of the harder routes so that you could experience more of the flora and fauna. So I made a point of making sure that we booked Juancho at Uritrek. And before I forget, when I returned home, I connected with Uritrek and asked them to become an affiliate of Active Travel Adventures so you can use the promo code ATA100, ATA100 to get $100 off your guided Costa Rica Camino tour. At the same time, you'll be helping to keep the podcast ad-free at no additional cost to you. And while I'm talking about affiliates, ATA is ad-free, but tries to pay the bills through these affiliate partnerships and links. So when you use my links on the activetraveladventures.com website, some of them, including tour companies, the travel insurance, and any product links, may earn ATA a small commission at no additional cost to you. This prevents the show from being interrupted to pitch you the mattresses, the underwear, get the special beef, and all the other common podcast merchant wares you hear these days. I hate those ads on the shows that I listen to, and I figured you would as well. And also, if you do book using my links, if you wouldn't mind, I'd appreciate a quick note at kit@activetraveladventures.com letting me know that you did so, as I found a few that have fallen through the cracks. My email link is on the podcast app for each episode if you scroll down on your phone or tablet, or in case you forget, you can just go to the activetraveladventures.com website and hit the contact link. It's just me doing this podcast, so everything comes directly to my inbox. It's much appreciated. Thank you so much. Now, let's get back to my Camino with Uritrek. The main hiking tour with Uritrek runs 16 days, but they do offer shorter, faster Caminos, and frankly, I think you're going to be pooped enough with the 16-day hike, so I don't recommend the shorter number of day hikes that they offer. For our Camino, I wanted us to experience even more of Costa Rica. Conchita had mentioned that several communities along the trail were creating excursions for the hikers, and I wanted to incorporate a broad spectrum of these interesting activities that we could do either during our day's hike as we were going by them or afterwards as a little bit of R&R. I also wanted to try to observe the sea turtles that begin coming to shore to nest in spring. And finally, I learned an important lesson after my New Zealand adventure that it's a great idea to build in some decompression time after adventure tour so you aren't jarred by the sudden re-entry into the chaos of life. So the tour I put together had a couple of day pre-day trip along the Caribbean where we could kayak and seek out these loggerhead turtles, and at the end, a few beach days on the Pacific near the famous Manuel Antonio National Park. I also included a mandatory fun day to raft the Macquarie River, something I'd done twice before I knew everyone would love. And I'm glad that I did, as it was a highlight for everyone. So for this trip, if you did all the pre and the post-day add-ons, it was 21 days. And plus, about half of us got to San Jose, the capital of Costa Rica, a couple days early to explore. So yes, it was a long trip, but it was so worth it. This was my 4th visit to Costa Rica, but I'd never spent much time in the capital. While I wouldn't call it the nicest city in the world, it's certainly worth a couple of days of exploration. The colonial downtown area near where we stayed is quite pretty. There are several museums you can visit, and I also like to find the street art, and I found a few fun pockets to check out. One afternoon when I was strolling around, a pop-up shower appeared, but I just happened to have an umbrella in my day pack. Then I slipped on a metal plate on the sidewalk and broke my umbrella. Had I not just passed an umbrella shop a few stores back, I probably would have just tossed it and not bothered replacing it. But it turned out that I used my new umbrella not just for rain so much as for a sun parasol. So I recommend that you pack a small umbrella for both uses. You'll be glad you did. We got to meet several of the folks in our group in San Jose. And as you've heard me mention many times before, people who take these adventure trips are self-selected to be cool, low-maintenance, interesting people. We all got along instantly and were chatting and laughing like we were old friends. Most of us were very well traveled, so we also got a chance to learn about cool destinations as well as being able to share fun stories without feeling like we were bragging. Frankly, this is something I worry about when I'm home, so it was fun reliving some of my experiences with the group. Previously, I only knew one person joining the tour. That was Sharon, whom you met on the Slovenia adventure. I'll put a link in the show notes. Also in the Caribbean pre-trip was Angie. I think she was the youngest at 50. Brenda, who really stepped it up as she was not feeling well, I think that whole first week. And a retired couple, Kevin and Patricia. All of these folks were from the U.S., plus cool Deborah came down from Canada. Most of us were in our 60s into our early 70s. All were solid hikers. Some used Becky from Trailblazer Wellness, another one of my affiliates, to come up with a custom training regimen. I'll link to Becky as well, and be sure to mention Ada to get my special 10% discount. She even created a Facebook group and a special training program just for people doing this Camino. After a couple of days exploring San Jose, we were ready for our shuttle to the coast to the Tortuga National Park region. It's a bit complicated to use public transport to get there. It's about 3 hours, roughly. And also, where the bus would leave you, you still have to arrange for some private transfers, plus a boat shuttle to cross the canals where we'd be staying. So it's really important, I think, to try to arrange that whole transfer with the tour company rather than trying to do that yourself. And I'm a big public transport person, but this one's complicated. En route to the coast, we got a thrill. There was a two-toed sloth slowly traveling across a power line. And remember, sloths are very slow creatures. All they do all day is sleep and eat. And once a week, they come down off the tree to poop. This is a security feature for them, because if they pooped up where they were staying that week, it would be easy for predators to get them as they're too slow to get away. So it was really cool to be able to see this mature sloth really slowly crawling across the power line, and it made it really easy for us to get a good view. I'll put a picture on the website. Often, if you ever see a sloth, they're sleeping in a tree and they just look like a matted brown furry ball. So this was a real treat. And they're really cute. They look like they're smiling at you. I'd only seen a couple of fur balls in my past visits to Costa Rica, and I was pleasantly surprised to see how many we would get to see on this trip. Umberto, our guide for the pre-trip, had excellent English, and he made a point of showing us things unique to Costa Rica. One funny example is what we here would call a speed bump is translated from Spanish as sleeping police, since the police don't need to be around to get the drivers to slow down. I thought that was funny. After we crossed the mainland, it was time for us to take a boat to our lodging. We were in a super remote part of the country, and you hardly saw any buildings. The canals we went through were a confusing maze, and I was glad to have an experienced local at the helm. Just getting to our lodging was a treat. At Tortuga National Park, it's all about the water. Tortuga National Park is a collection of lush green jungle islands with canals cutting through them, creating a maze of corridors for the locals. Almost 40% of this region is completely protected. Tortuga translates to turtles, and this is what I was hoping to see before we started our hike. At our lodging, the Mwamba Lodge, we were welcomed with a refreshing drink, and after we got settled in, Sharon, Angie, and I went out in a kayak. Now, I have to say I was really proud of Angie. She does not like critters, and in this canal, there are big, mean critters called crocodiles. So Angie put on her biggest big girl pants and kayaked solo in the canal. We were lucky enough to see a crocodile. At least Sharon and I thought we were lucky. I can't speak for Angie. You also get to see a lot of birds in Costa Rica, as it's known for its fabulous bounty of birds, many of which are super colorful. We felt a bit like Robinson Crusoe paddling in a completely deserted preserve. I don't recall seeing anyone else out there except later Patricia and Kevin. One of the birds we got to know real well that had a fun call, they referred to as the Montezuma bird. This is a colorful, bright yellow and black bird that builds these really unique pendulous nests. I want you to picture like a large eyedropper that's squeezing a drop of water out in a big drip, and from that drip is a tail of water emerging from the dropper. So you've got this pendulum kind of a thing. That's what those nests look like, and they nest in clusters in the trees. So you'll see a whole bunch of activities as the birds are going in and out and calling, and that was kind of fun. In addition to seeing several herons out seeking dinner, we saw, but actually really heard, howler monkeys. These are small monkeys with a special voice box that amplifies their hoots and calls. When you first hear one, you assume it's going to look like a gorilla, only to see that they're well under 2 feet tall. You're like, that little thing made all that noise? That evening, we got a boat tour of the Tortuguera Canals to check out the beautiful landscape and to look for cool animals. Plus, we had some time to walk around a small village. Again, I was grateful for a captain who intimately knew this maze of canals. My favorite new critter was the Jesus iguana, because this iguana knows how to walk, or rather I should say run, on top of the water. Our captain's eyes are really trained for critters and insects, as even when he stopped to point out this roughly foot-long lizard, we still had problems seeing him, even though he was right by the boat, because his green color blends in so perfectly with the leaves. It was really fun watching faces light up when somebody finally could see it. We also saw some howler and spider monkeys, plus a toucan. Toucans look as cartoonish as the Fruit Loops Toucan Sam mascot with their colorful, oversized beaks. At dusk in some of the marshy coves, caiman, which are like little miniature alligators, they plunged into the murky dark water as we glided by safely in our boat. I counted 8 troops of howler monkey groups that we heard on that boat ride. Before long, it was time to take another boat shuttle to meet the rest of our group over at the Lirio Lodge. We'd be meeting Tony and Sue, Dale and Peg. Again, all cool people and avid hikers. Tony and Sue own a very creative winery in Iowa, which I didn't even know you could produce wine there. Dale is an astrophysicist who he tasks with teaching us about black holes and other complicated concepts to distract us from super challenging climbs. And I must say, he was able to break it down into a way that we could kind of understand. And Peg always inspired us by looking so cool and put together while hiking in this tropical heat. I don't know how she did it. When we first got together, I was a bit concerned, unnecessarily as it turned out, that since the pre-trip folks had already bonded together, I was worried that we might form 2 cliques. But that never happened, and within a couple hours, we formed one big group. Our lodge was lovely and surrounded by gorgeous gardens. Costa Rica sure can grow some of the most exotic blooms. My favorites are the colorful gingers that look like large, perfect wax blooms, although our excellent guide Umberto said that sometimes what looked like blooms to us were technically the bracts that surround a tiny bloom. One of the most exotic blooms is a lobster claw heliconia. These bright orange and yellow blooms hang down like a rope decorated with colorful lobster claws. Umberto, who seemed to know every single plant and animal, took us on an evening garden walk. Dusk through dawn is a great time to see nature moving about, as many critters are nocturnal. He had already scouted out where to find one of the red-eyed bright green tree frogs. This is that iconic frog that you see in many Costa Rica advertisements. We also saw the beautiful golden orb spider, a walking stick spider, and some really cool parasitic bugs feasting on this large tasty bloom. Under a large leaf were tent bats resting before heading out for dinner. We saw mostly insects, as I think the mammals can hear us and they hide better. At dusk, we did see the magnificent macaws chattering in the treetops. They tend to fly around with their mates. The Lirio Lodge was quite cush with a nice patio and pool area plus a tiki bar. We all relax as tomorrow we start the big hike. But first tonight, we take yet another boat over to the Barrier Island to take a brisk 6K walk to ceremonially touch the Caribbean Sea. We see our first Camino marker. These are quite frankly lovely sculpted concrete pillars with a sign that tells folks it's the Costa Rica Camino and feature the cute red hummingbird logo. We put our feet in a circle by the shore's edge and grab a quick photo before a rogue wave startles us and washes away our footprints. We have begun. The next ocean we will see is the Pacific in a little over 2 weeks after 175 miles of hiking. Juancho picks up a coconut from the sand and slices it open with his machete so we can all get a piece. We also join the research station along the coast once it gets dark in hopes of seeing a female loggerhead come to nest. We see what I think are large tractor tire marks in the sand. Holy mackerel, I had no idea that a turtle could be so huge. These quote-unquote tire marks are actually dents in the sand from a mama's flippers as she came out to make a nest to lay her eggs. But this mother changed her mind, turned around, and went back to sea. A mature loggerhead, the largest hard-shell turtle, can be over 3 feet long and can weigh up to 1,000 pounds, although most weigh around 300. A mother usually lays 3 clutches, or batches, of eggs before taking a few years off. They don't even reach sexual maturity until after age 17 and can only reproduce up to age 33, so obviously they have a low reproductive rate. Their lifespan ranges from about 47 to 67 years. And if the survival rate of the young is similar to the turtles that nest in North Carolina, only about 1% will make it to adulthood. No wonder they're on the endangered species list. We meet a volunteer who's been there for 2 weeks and has yet to see a loggerhead nest. Then we meet another man who on his very first night out gets lucky, so it can be a bit of a crapshoot whether you'll see one come in or not. The man illegally videotaped the mom and he showed it to us. The rules are quite strict about such things as they don't want anything to discourage a mother from laying her eggs. Poaching is a problem. The eggs are food to a lot of ticos. That's the nickname the Costa Ricans call themselves. To avoid confrontation, the deal is whoever spots the mother first gets control of the eggs. If researchers find the nest, it's theirs to protect. If a poacher finds it first, it's theirs to harvest. Researchers can walk their section of the beach, turn around, and then a mother emerges from the sea in the dark, and then a poacher might spot her while the researcher's back is to her. It's just the way it is, and it helps keep the peace. The researcher will collect the eggs that they do find, and then they'll release them when they hatch. While our group has no luck, we learn a lot, and we learn to really appreciate this magnificent creature. Finally, the big day has arrived. We begin our real hike. Once again, we start off in a boat to get to the main trailhead. En route, we stop at one of the few local homes. There, the wife of our boat captain has macrameed these darling little hummingbirds out of plastic twine. Like I mentioned, the hummingbird is the symbol of the Costa Rica Camino, much like a scallop shell is for the Spanish El Camino. As a treat, I get everyone in the group a bird to hang from their day packs. We have officially begun. The first couple of days are pretty flat as we're still by the sea. It's the middle of Costa Rica that's filled with the rugged mountains. We soon leave the tiny village area and enter the banana plantations. There are acres and acres of banana plants. The fruit bunches are encased in blue plastic bags, presumably to keep pests off and to prevent damage. The unlucky souls who harvest the bananas put the bunches on wire cables that work their way to the packing facility. Once inside, they're dunked to wash them and are crated for shipment, and then plopped into the bays of waiting trucks. It looks like back-breaking work all around. I thought walking through the plantations might be boring, but actually I found it fascinating and a good way to warm up the body for the climbs to come. Right around the time we were ready for a break, Eurotrek has provided. Under a lean-to, it might even have been a bus stop, some local women have prepared some cut-up fruits for us to enjoy. There's an array of pineapple, papaya, and bananas to fill our bellies. It's a refreshing break. One of the main reasons I want to do this hike, in addition to the fact that I love Costa Rica, is that the trail serves 2 purposes. One is to showcase the beautiful country and its many ecosystems, but frankly, more importantly, the trail weaves through small rural villages untouched by tourism. Like many small villages around the world, if there are no jobs for the kids move to the cities and the villages decline. Even the locals who remain may only have seasonal work. The coffee pickers, for example, have work just in the fall. It makes it really tough for families to make a decent living. So what this trail does is provide opportunities for these small villages to provide food and lodging for the hikers, and some even, like I said before, are figuring out some other little excursions that they can offer. The nonprofit Mara Mara Association, which created and manages the trail, seems to work in particular with the local women, helping them to provide hiker services so they can bring in a little extra income for the family. And they can do it working from home, without taking away from the men's work. Another example of what they're doing is that the association built a lean-to on the side of a family's home so that the wife could prepare and service hikers in what turned out to be my favorite lunch on the trail. Juancho or other Camino guides simply call up a day in advance so that the woman knows how many hikers she'll need to feed the next day. It earns her some extra money, she's able to work from home, plus we get to see her local life from the laundry area out back to having her kids playing next to us while we ate. This trail is such a huge win-win situation. Even villagers not officially tied in with the trail are figuring out ways to earn a little extra income on the side. We saw one handmade sign offering helados, 250 colones. Helados means ice cream. I could read it, but they'd get a lot more business if they drew an ice cream cone or translate into English for those that can't. And I always got a kick out of whenever we stopped at a convenience store. And these would be like little teeny shops that carry a little bit of everything so folks don't have to make a special trip to the city. We would enter like a horde of locusts, buying up all the sweet and salty snacks, all the ice creams and sodas. I'm sure the owners are doing a week's worth of business during our little 15-minute stop. Lunch was at Yolanda's place. We were served a Caribbean feast in her dining room with live chicken scuttering around our feet. That cracked me up. Almost all meals had fresh squeezed juices, which were refreshing. I don't drink a lot of juice at home, but then again, I'm not often offered fresh squeezed whatevers. I think that when you're burning as many calories as we were, the added sugar and calories was a good thing. After lunch at Yolanda's place, we continue on and eventually end our 16-mile, 25-kilometer day's hike at the coast-to-coast glamping site built by the Mar Amar Association. And they did a terrific job. There's a lovely outdoor tin-covered lean-to kitchen and dining area with a couple of outlets that we could charge our phones. And by the way, Costa Rica uses the same 110-volt electrical outlets as we use in the United States, FYI. And then also the association, in addition to this public area, they built sturdy tent platforms with nice-sized tents filled with comfortable sleeping bags and pads. The bathrooms offered cold showers, but that was fine, as it just felt great to get clean and inspect our bodies for wear. Peggy had brought the new Costa Rica Camino guidebook, and I was flipping through it. I think the author incorrectly states certain stages are moderate or even easy. And I'm going to have to say I completely disagree with him emphatically. This Camino turned out to be much harder than I anticipated. The daily miles are often long, with most being around 16 miles, so even on the days that you don't have a lot of elevation change, that's still a lot of pounding on your feet. Plus, no matter what time of year you're hiking, much of the trail is going to be hot and humid. I'm going to put a link to the book in the show notes, and there's a lot of helpful information in there, but in my opinion, disregard his guidance on the difficulty level of the various sections. I found them to be unreasonable. I also want to point out that while the Camino has these beautiful concrete markers noting the completion of the different stages, there's 16 stages altogether, much of the trail is not blazed, so you're likely to get really lost without a guide. In addition, an indigenous guide is required to enter the indigenous region. So on that day, we had two guides, Juancho and Giovanni, plus our young indigenous guide to lead us the way through the jungle. Some of us were already having some trouble with our feet. Angie had brought these wonderful blue gel squares that you tape over a hot spot that worked wonders. I rarely get blisters. I think it's because I wear liner socks. I like the toe sock kind, as well as putting a wool sock on top. What my issue was that the bottom of my feet were getting super sore. I think it's because we're often walking on rural gravel and dirt roads, where you hardly see a car, so it doesn't make a difference that you're on a road. Just think of it as a really wide trail. So often the path was a road rather than a trail whose surface gives a little bit more. I guess they don't call it the Camino, which means roads in Spanish, for nothing. After a couple days, I ended up wearing my thicker wool socks. Even though they were hot, that extra padding, along with a second insert, provided that little extra cushioning I needed. I was glad to trade a bit of heat rash from where the wool socks would climb up over my liner socks for that little bit of extra padding. I think another reason I rarely get blisters is because I buy larger hiking shoes than my foot. This allows my feet to swell as they tend to do by the afternoon, plus it gives me the room for this little extra cushioning. Remember, you can tighten the laces to keep your foot from moving about. For this hike, I brought properly worn in, waterproof hiking shoes that had good ankle support. You could get away with trail runners, but I wasn't sure before I went. However, on the indigenous hiking day, I was glad I was wearing these shoes. My shoes, and I'll put links to all my gear in the show notes, weren't too hot, and that was what I was most worried about. I figured at least some of the time we'd be hiking in the rain. After all, there's going to be many days we're hiking in rainforests. So I opted for these shoes, and I was pleased with them. We crossed a lot of streams, so my shoes were helpful there as well. My best advice: make sure your shoes offer tons of cushioning and support and allow your feet to swell up at the end of each day. And always, always keep your toenails cut short so they don't jam on the downhills and turn black or fall off. I like using hiking poles, and while you really don't need them for most of the hike, I did find them helpful crossing streams as well as on the day that we were in the indigenous area, which is the most rugged section of the trail. I'm going to be talking more about that later. I think we all slept the sleep of the dead on our first night, but got up ready to hike again. For breakfast, we had the typical meal of fresh fruit, usually pineapple and papaya, pico de gallo, that's the beans and rice mix ubiquitous to Costa Rica, a white semi-solid cheese that was served daily, and scrambled eggs with delicious coffee. Remember that Costa Rica is a major exporter of coffee, so you know it's going to be good. In addition to banana plantations, we'd often pass pineapple plantations. Pineapple plants are attractive silver-gray yucca-looking plants, and the pineapple comes out of the center. I believe they're in the bromeliad family, so that means that once they fruit, the mother plant dies and little pups come around off the side, and nature starts again. Again, a lot of work, and I believe almost all the work of harvesting here is done manually. While passing through a small village, Juancho pointed at the wall of a house under the eaves. There were a dozen bats hanging out for the day. You got sharp eyes, Juancho. Giovanni used his machete to take the seed pod down off a carob tree to show us. These highly valuable and attractive trees offer the sweet fruit that you're familiar with. And I remember that in Portugal, I learned that the fruits were always exactly the same weight, and they used to be used as a scale for that reason. By the end of the day, the mountains have come into view. We are now walking amongst charming fincas, or farms. So we see lots of bucolic cows and pastures with tiny homesteads covered in tin roofs. We've left the roads and are now walking through forests. Sometimes Juancho takes us on a detour for an even prettier route. He's done this trail, I think, around 20 times already and knows every nook and cranny. Even when he's finished guiding us for the day, he's off and out exploring. And since we're leaving the plantations and have a more diverse landscape, we're starting to see more interesting critters. Costa Rica has some amazing frogs, brilliantly covered frogs. We soon learn about the blue jean frog. This is a bright red frog that has denim-colored legs resembling blue jeans. Juancho and Giovanni's eagle eyes spot cool critters all the time for us to check out. On the path, Giovanni spots the paw print of a large cat indented on the dirt trail. I'm not talking like a tomcat, I'm talking a big cat, like a cougar or a puma cat. This is one of the smaller of the big cats, but nonetheless, I was impressed. We'd soon be entering one of the few areas that has 6 species of the big wild cats, including jaguars, pumas, and ocelots. The shade is appreciated as well. You should know, you're going to be hot. You are fairly close to the equator, so unless you're high up in a mountain, which sometimes we are, it's going to be hot and it's often going to be humid. And this is going to drain you more than you think, and I believe adds to the difficulty of the trail. Coming from eastern North Carolina, I'm used to nasty, sweaty humidity, and I'm hoping that's going to compensate for living at sea level when we hit these upcoming mountains. The folks from out west, however, are going to have the opposite problem. They're used to the elevation changes, but not the heat and humidity. We're not going to be passing any villages today, so in the last village we pass, some local women have prepared our lunch. It's a tortilla filled with goodies wrapped in a banana leaf. Around midday, we stop where a long log acts as our seat for us to rest and to eat. I carry in my backpack a roughly 16-inch square piece of ripstop that you can buy in a fabric store, and I use this to sit on logs and such so that no biting critters like chiggers can get at me. They have a devilish ant here called a bullet ant that you will remember if it bites you. My ripstop weighs nothing and keeps hidden bugs off my butt and keeps my butt dry. For water, I brought my water reservoir and 2 1-liter Papa Free water bottles, which I recommend. If you use a water bladder, you're likely going to drink more water because it's hard to grab your water bottles while you're wearing a pack. How long we hike each day will tell me how much water to put in the bladder, and then I have a reserve in my bottle. On long days, hot days, or places where I won't have access, I'll have both bottles filled. You want to bring just enough water so you don't get dehydrated, but at 8 pounds a gallon, you don't want to carry any more than you have to. It's been very muddy today, so our clothes are a mess. It'll be a while before we can get them cleaned up unless we shower in them. In our Eurotrek itinerary, each day is laid out what we're to do and what amenities we can expect. Are we going to have hot water? Are we going to have Wi-Fi? Those days are a treat. As are washing machines. There's rarely a dryer. We usually just dry on the line. And as I mentioned, sometimes we have added excursions, and today we have one. We are visiting a butterfly farm. Have you ever gone to a wedding where butterflies are released after the vows? This is the kind of farm that produces the chrysalis. Those are the cocoons of the butterflies for such events. So within the large netted butterfly house, there are hundreds of magnificent butterflies, including my favorite, the large morpho butterfly. The morpho looks like a large but rather nondescript butterfly until it opens its wings and you see shocking electric blue coloring. Absolutely gorgeous. Their wings are, I've got to say, at least 4 inches wide, maybe bigger. Also along the way, we pass a school that the Maramar Association has colorfully painted with iconic Costa Rica animals like toucans, sloths, and monkeys. Throughout the trail, the association has artists painting murals, and in this case, a school. I love how this association truly enhances the communities in which the trail weaves. You can tell we're nearing the rainforest. There are clouds brooding over the mountaintops and in the higher valleys. It's all so beautiful. And by going at this slow pace, you get to really drink it all in. I'm going to have a ton of photos and video on the website, activetraveladventures.com, so be sure to check it out. Costa Rica has many ecosystems, and we pass through a bunch of them on this hike. It also has 3 climate zones. Take the country and divide it into 3 chunks, using 2 vertical lines. On the Caribbean, where we started, is the warm, humid zone. In the center, as we cross over the mountains and volcanoes formed by the crashing tectonic plates, it turns into a cool, dry climate. And then over on the Pacific western coast, it's a warm, dry climate. Tonight, we're staying in a lovely private home with magnificent panoramic mountain views. The large porch has plenty of clothesline for us to attempt to dry out our damp hiking clothes. I should mention that we only have to carry a day pack while hiking. Eurotrek transfers our main luggage for us to our next destination each day. And let's say you're having a pain issue. You could always go with the luggage to give yourself a rest day. Also, I should note that solo rooms are sometimes available for a fee. Otherwise, us solo hikers just switched around our roommates each night, and this has worked out fine. On the 4th day of hiking, we head into the indigenous region. There are 8 recognized indigenous tribes in Costa Rica, and to enter their lands you must have permission. To hike through, you have to hire an indigenous guide. Since the trail is not marked, and there are many intersecting trails, this would be prudent even if it wasn't required. And for some reason, I'm expecting an older man to meet us at 8 a.m., but what I find is a young man in his 20s with a big smile, wearing a denim-colored head bandana, a t-shirt, and polyester long shorts. Today will be the most challenging day on the trail. And once you start, you're going to be in the middle of nowhere, so you have to finish. There are no bailout points. Several in the group wisely decide to take a rest day and go with the luggage. There will be significant elevation change over slippery wet roots and rocks and lots of mud. Bring your sticks. This is the one day that hiking boots would be appreciated, although I think you could get away with trail runners or hiking shoes instead if you want to pack light. Before we head into the forest, we pass an indigenous village with charming thatched roofs and chickens milling about. Soon we hit a river wide and deep enough that the shoes need to come off. We are safely escorted across water that comes to our knees. And then we enter the jungle. It's exotic and wild, with hugely large, dark, glossy green leaves and vines and noises. Plants grow everywhere there's a space, from epiphytes on the tree limbs and any nook and cranny, all reaching to the sky for what little light is available. We see many tree frogs, especially the darling blue jean frog. Our eyes are starting to get trained so that we can spot them too. One thing we see a lot of are leafcutter ants. These ants tear out a piece of leaf and form a line from the leaf source back to the nest, so you'll see hordes of industrious ants in a line hurrying back and forth to their home. They don't eat the leaves, but rather they eat the mold that forms as the leaves decompose. You may remember a funny story about the leafcutter ants from my Nicaragua episode. I had inadvertently clipped the leafcutter ant line when I set up my tent on my last night camping. When I got up in the morning, ants had ripped out about a half a dozen diamond quarter-sized chunks out of my brand new tent. While I have photos that you can see on the Nicaragua page, I regret not taking a video of this. It was hysterical. While it is mostly green and muddy in the forest, there is an occasional bloom, like the decadent hot lips plant with voluptuous lip-shaped blooms, or the also red exotic passion vine. The trail at times is a muddy bog and the travel is slow going. It is hard, but I'm loving it. I feel like I'm on a real adventure. And remember, if you lose your footing, which I think we all manage to do at one point or another, you can't grab a limb or a vine for support around here. You never know what kind of critter could be supported by it as well, and you don't want to get bit or stung. In Costa Rica, you stay on the path. We rest along a river covered with large moss-laden boulders. I feel like I'm in Wonderland. But at the end of every break, we hear Juancho calling, "Okay, people," that was our cue to begin again. Everywhere there are signs of life, and even where there is death, the cycle renews with mushrooms sprouting in the decay. Towards the end of the day's hike, we come to the village where our guide lives for a very late lunch and a chance to see the museum of the indigenous lifestyle that they have made for their hiker guests. The buildings were all made in the traditional style of post and beam with a thatched roof, and I believe the association also helped to fund this. Some of the local women have made some jewelry for us to purchase. We all pick out a few items to help support them. The jewels are made from native seed pods, rocks, and other local plant resources. Some Camino hikers get to stay here, but after a too-short visit, for us, it's time to press on. We were all tired, and I suspect we all would have preferred to stay rather than to hike on another, I think it was 4 miles. But as it turns out, there was more adventure to come. Tomorrow we're going to be rafting the wonderful and rollicking Bacory River, but before that, we have to cross that river in a metal cage bucket. Like I said, we are all pretty bushed by this point. I think Peggy mentioned, but only when asked, how she was doing. Peggy says she was on her last nerve. That day was a tough, grueling hike, but the end was in sight. All we had to do was cross the river and then climb one more mountain where shuttle and hot showers await. But when we get to the river, uh-oh, Houston, we got a problem. The basket pulley to cross the river is broken. After fiddling with it for a while, we realize we're not going to be able to fix it. Now what? We are in the middle of nowhere, and we have to get across the river. I remember telling Sue as she turned the corner of the trail and reached the river that we had a problem. And I wish I had a video of her face. It truly just fell. Just fell. I'm sure we'd all promised our bodies that it was almost over, and as much as I love hiking and I love this day, the Type 1 fun, where you're having fun while you're doing it, had now morphed into Type 2 fun, where it's fun only in the retelling of the story, like it is for me right now. A decision is made. We're going to hold on to the broken rope of the pulley that Juancho has dragged across. The guides hold on to us as we cross the more vigorous currents, and then we can hold on to the rope on our own. I'm grateful when all of us safely make it to the other side of this fast-moving, waist-high river. I'm going to put a link in the show notes of my companion podcast, the Adventure Travel Show podcast, on how to cross a river. I think it's really important, particularly if you did not have the benefit of a rope like we did that day. We are all wide awake and invigorated now. It turned out to be exciting and fun with just a hint of controlled danger. We're now all also wet, and we will be hiking in sopping wet boots for the final 2 miles, but the river crossing has actually buoyed our spirits. But it was a long slog up that final climb. It was a straight ascent, if memory serves. So we rejoiced to see the van waiting to take us to the lodge. Tonight we're going to have some luxury, and tomorrow is a day off. We are in a celebratory mood. It turns out that we're staying at the same lodge that my sister Terry and I stayed in a few years back when we went down there to raft the Macquarie. It has a festive tropical vibe and a decent restaurant. There are lovely gardens surrounding the lodge. At night, since we're up high, you get a magnificent view of the city lights of Turrialba down below. When we arrived, some of the folks who decided to pass on this section greeted us with the best icy cold brews ever. It was a fine reward for a tough day and much appreciated. Thanks. There was a small band playing in the corner of the dining room, and a young couple sat next to them. Soon the young man got up and, with backup from the band, began serenading the gal. After several songs, he finally proposed. I must say he had a nice voice, but we were like, "All right, guy, just go ahead and propose already." On my way back to the room, I saw a beautiful golden orb spider in its large web right next to the path. I love how I was starting to learn what the different things were. Frankly, I just love Costa Rica. In the morning, Dale points out a most intimidating wall map. I don't know why this didn't register earlier, but even after visiting Costa Rica 3 times before, I don't think I really understood how mountainous it was. After all, I was driving before, so my body wasn't attuned to the elevation changes. But here they had a topographical relief map in the lobby that showed exactly how ruggedly mountainous Costa Rica was. I sure hope I trained enough for this. I'm going to explain to you how the whole landmass formed. All right, as the tectonic plates formed under the sea, as they collided, they formed North and South America, which emerged out from the ocean and then formed the continents as we know them today. Eventually, the narrow spit of land that we call Central America popped up, which bridged these 2 larger land masses. This skinny bridge allowed the animals and plants to migrate, which is one reason why there's such a great concentration and a great biodiversity in this Central American region. In fact, for such a small landmass, Costa Rica contains 5% of the world's biodiversity, which is pretty cool. And as cool as this little spit of land is, this mountain range that we're about to go into looks really intimidating. Fortunately, we're often walking through the passes and not up and over the top of the highest peaks along the trail. But the map sure was intimidating. But before we hit those peaks, it was time for a little R&R. In the morning, we have mandatory fun. Having done this rafting trip twice, I knew it was a blast, and to make sure everybody got to experience it, I included it as part of the tour. You didn't have to go, but I made you pay for it. Like I said, mandatory fun, one of the perks of organizing a trip. We will be rafting the Macquarie, the same river that we had to ford late yesterday where the basket broke. The river is made up of lots of Class 2 to Class 4 rapids with a ton of Class 3s, so it's very exciting, but you're not going to die. Nat Geo has ranked this section of the river in its top 10 in the world for day rafting trips. There is a reason I keep going back. We get shuttled to the put-in and get out helmets, life jackets, and paddle, plus get a bit of instruction, and off we go. This river runs through the indigenous area, and there's very little construction along its banks. So you are paddling through a magical rainforest like you're the only people on the planet. You're likely to see eagles, those electric blue morpho butterflies, and if you're lucky, a monkey or 2. You will see lots of waterfalls. We even paddle under one. There's a large rock you can jump off. We fill up 2 rafts, and all you can hear as you head down the river is the laughter of us all, but especially Deborah, Patricia, and Sharon. It was a joyous, raucous laughter, and we all loved it. As you come near a rapid, our guide would shout out, "Paddle left, paddle right, back paddle, get in the boat," or whatever command was required to get us safely through the rapid. What a blast. Midway, we stopped for a lunch break at the Macquarie River Eco Lodge. The guides have whipped up a delightful buffet. We are ravenous and devour our selections. Then we rest in the hammocks or chairs overlooking the water before we head back out for the rest of our rafting journey. After lunch, we come to my favorite part of the river. It's a fabulous section where the river has carved a deep rock gorge and the current is calm, so you can get out of the raft and float along next to the rafts. The water is warm and calming. Too soon, it's all over, and we all agree it's been a definite highlight. We rehashed the day's events at a small cantina at the end of the trip. It's a great place to get into dry clothes and grab a cold beer, Imperial, my local favorite, and I'm guessing it's the national beer of Costa Rica. A couple of recommendations for this or any rafting trip. Villa Hotel shampoo, one of those tiny containers with sunscreen that you can keep in your pocket. My sunscreen washed off and my thighs got fried. Also, bring a waterproof phone carrier so you can take some pictures. Pack a ball cap so you can have that shade protection under your safety helmet. And consider long sleeves also for sun protection. Also get one of those tog things that keeps you from losing your sunglasses. But whatever you do, make sure you make it to Costa Rica and raft the Pequari River. You will thank me for it. I'm going to stop here for part 1 of our Costa Rica Camino adventure. So far we hiked about a quarter of the Camino. At this point, I think my body is doing fine, but little did I know that the next day would totally wipe me out and make me wonder if I could even continue. Spoiler alert, I did complete the trail, and I'm so proud of myself and the others for doing so. Learn more about the Costa Rica Camino and what happened next in part 2 of our Costa Rica Camino series. If you don't want to wait for the official release, it's available on the website now for immediate download at activetraveladventures.com. And speaking of the website, if you haven't done so, be sure to check out the website. I've spent countless hours building it out with helpful tips, details on planning your next exciting adventure, uploading a ton of photos, as well as creating a travel planner for each adventure. The search feature is super helpful as you can search by activity, time of year, continent or country, and much more. Please play around with it and let me know what you think, particularly any improvements. You can always reach me at kit@activetraveladventures.com. I hope you're enjoying the Costa Rica Camino. I really appreciate you listening. Until next time, this is Kit Parks. Adventure on!